I always hated it when people tried imitating dogs, but hearing it coming from Morgie was a bit different and a lot worse. Before Sonson could even put his finger on the trigger, his head was mashed into pulp. Morgie began pouncing on other guards, effortlessly crushing limbs with his oversized paws. He'd switched between running around on his feet and crawling on all fours. The last thing I saw before running out of the break room was Morgie forcing the remaining horrified agents to play fetch with him using a stray arm. But of course, it's not like I managed to escape anywhere better. The entire place was in a fucking tizzy. The squad leaders were frenetic, attempting to scrap together some kind of suppression force. I couldn't understand why they were so delusional. Are we guards supposed to be badass? Fuck yeah! Due to our field prowess, we're specifically selected from the existing pool of CIA agents and military personnel to be dropped into this godforsaken place. Put us against a trafficking militia, terrorists, etc., we'll smoke them. But what we can't deal with are things that aren't supposed to exist in the first place. We watch creature features and slasher fics with the inherent understanding that we are watching fiction, a type of visual catharsis for our inherent fascination with the dark and grim. It's not supposed to be real, and we have no idea how to act once we find it standing right in front of our faces, not even us so-called elite agents. Like I said, I'm not sure why they even bothered keeping guards in the chasm to begin with. These were the thoughts that ran through my head as I bolted through the hellish corridors. At one point, I stumbled upon a crowd of guards leering over some rails. Shockingly, they didn't seem concerned in the slightest.
What the hell are you guys looking at?
I asked them. A guard I recognized as Fenton turned around.
Oh, this is gonna be sick.
He grinned, gesturing for me to look below. I didn't even know where I was going, so I didn't realize that I'd wandered into the level right above the weight room. It was a sprawling gym with an abundance of the best equipment attainable, but there was one guard that used it the most, Branko Petrovic, a Serbian-American whose oversized frame hardly makes any fucking sense. I swear, when I first met this guy, he couldn't have been over 7 feet. He's around 8'2", or 249 centimeters now. I'm not quite sure what kind of bizarre experiment they ran on him, but they sure as hell overdid it. He was in the middle of overhead pressing what appeared to be an ungodly amount of weight when one of the escaped voids wandered into the weight room floor. It was Luz, standing at 6'2", 188 centimeters, 205 pounds, 93 kilograms. Like all the other prisoners, the guy was a complete mystery. His mostly bare body was comparable of that of a bodybuilder's, save for the hundreds of gnarly scars decorating his skin. The more disconcerting part of his aesthetic was the fact that he only had one half of his face. The other consisted of his exposed skull, with some kind of red electrical current running through his cranial bones. He had the same current running through his hands, which allowed him to savagely electrocute whatever organic material he touched, quickly rendering it into a pile of steaming black mush. I guess that my fellow agents didn't bother reading up on the prisoners they guarded because Branko never stood a chance. It didn't matter if you were superior to Luz in terms of strength. One touch and you were gone. The only practical way of taking him down was by using ranged weapons, and even then, that task was easier said than done. Branko grunted like the dumb meathead he is, before grabbing an Olympic weightlifting plate and chucking it like a frisbee at Luz. It connected, seemingly shattering his ribs, but it wasn't nearly enough to take him down. As soon as he rushed forward, the fight had been decided. Branko attempted to tackle him, a mistake so horrible that his whole body began twitching as his skin made contact with Luz's fingertips. The electricity spread through his giant frame, causing his vitals to shut down within seconds. In no time at all, he was reduced to a heaping mass of scorched flesh on the floor. He didn't even have time to scream. I could see the respective faces of my stunned colleagues drop as they witnessed what they likely deemed an improbable outcome. Idiots, that's what they were. But truth be told, I was also an idiot for even bothering to stay. Not long after, the sounds of cracking bones and heavy footsteps began emanating from an adjacent walkway. Along with the rest of the agents, my gaze shifted toward what was sure to be another incoming menace. The locked metal door to the corridor was suddenly dented from the other side. A big fucking dent, mind you. It only took one blow to blast it off its hinges completely. Standing at 6'6", 198 centimeters, and 242 pounds, 110 kilograms, and arriving in a haze of blood, guts, and limbs was the slasher-flick-esque killer, colloquially known as Wirehead. In congruence with his name, his entire head, save for a single eye, was wrapped in rusty barbed wire. He wore a decrepit old leather jacket and jeans, complete with a large pompadour on top. like an 80 or whatever high school delinquent. Everyone's main concern was the weapon in his hands, a large iron bat wrapped in the same barbed wire on his head. If you didn't die from the impact, unlikely, the subsequent infection would surely get you. And don't ask us why we didn't take his weapon away when we contained him. We did, but somehow, some way, he got it back. These things really can't be helped. What the hell is going on? I thought. Breaches happen, sure, but it seemed as if every fucking void had somehow escaped. How is that possible? In any case, I couldn't afford to think deep into it at the moment. As Wirehead began moving down the mystified agents in his way, I found myself accidentally making eye contact with Luz from below. I nearly had a heart attack as I began pushing through the crowd, even though I was implicitly certain of the fact that no other location within the chasm would have been much safer. I was still being driven ahead by my fight-or-flight responses, away from that immediate threat. It was kind of funny. I had been through so many life-or-death scenarios that my reaction to adrenaline coursing through my veins had been dulled. Well, it sure as hell got invigorated today. I guess that I wasn't paying attention to my surroundings because right as I was about to climb a staircase, I felt an oversized arm slam into my chest, knocking me over in the process. I looked up to see another guard, Sade, leering down at me. Sure, I was happy it wasn't one of the voids, but Sade wasn't much more pleasant.
What are you running for?
He shot me a smug grin.
This is a breach, isn't it? Why don't we do our jobs here and fix it? Oh, fuck off!
I spat at him before trying to duck past. No luck there. He caught me by the collar and slammed me to the wall. He certainly had the weight advantage. Still, I didn't practice hand-to-hand combat just to be ragdolled by some asshole. I slammed my elbow down into his wrist, which managed to loosen his grip. I followed up with a knee to the stomach and attempted to strike his neck, but then he caught my wrist mid-punch.
Nice moves,
he said with an obnoxiously sarcastic tone. He took his palm and rammed it into my chin, nearly causing me to black out. In the meantime, Wirehead was getting closer.
I guess we'll have to take this up another time,
he said.
Somebody's got to work around here.
I had no idea what he was thinking trying to take on one of the voids, but I wasn't trying to see his delusions through in person. Still in pain from his palm strike, I pulled myself up and began running once more, all while the sounds of carnage escalated around me. But there was a glaring issue. I had no idea where I was going. The exits were surely going to be blocked off from the outside. Do we have some kind of safe room? I thought to myself. No, of course we didn't. We were entirely expendable. They 100% expected us to fight these things head on, even though there was zero fucking chance of victory on our side. There was only one thing I could do here. Survive until TFE-NH showed up. Obviously, that wasn't any kind of guaranteed reprieve, but my options were slim. Nevertheless, something rather surprising transpired. Amidst the cacophony of frenetic orders from our superiors, a familiar voice snuck in through my radio.
Hey, Jason, you alive?
It was Sandu. I picked up my radio and isolated his transmission.
Yeah, where are you, man?
Block C. Got lucky and found something weird. It might save us, though. Come on.
Obviously, there wasn't much information there, but it was better than running around aimlessly. Thankfully, Block C was fairly close, so I was able to make it out without running into another void. However, when I got there, it was still as chaotic as ever. I swiveled my head around, trying to spot Sandu. I yelled into my radio, but his response was drowned out by everything around me. As I searched, I began sensing a perplexing, sinister pressure that made it feel as if I were sinking into the concrete beneath me. I hardly had to guess the source. It was Diaxek. 9'5", 287 centimeters. I don't know how much he weighs. Diaxek was comparable in appearance to something you'd see in the corner of your room during sleep paralysis. A hulking, faceless figure wearing a sweeping black robe that jerked around in unsettling movements as he, or she, who knows, walked. I wasn't sure how exactly he killed people, mind you. As soon as anyone got within a certain distance to him, they'd freeze in place and begin bleeding from their eyes, and then they'd just stay that way forever. Obviously, that wasn't something I was looking forward to. As I looked ahead, I could see some unfortunate guards already getting caught in his death zone. In an attempt to avoid a similar fate, I turned the opposite direction and began running. Then, I nearly shit myself. Standing about 10 feet away was the undead Nazi. 5'8", 173 centimeters, 143 pounds, 65 kilograms. His name essentially told it all. A man wearing a dirty, tattered SS uniform with a cracked gas mask covering his face. In one hand, He gripped his signature Kampfmesser 42 blade that was inexplicably unbreakable, no matter what the hell he tried doing to it. He held a flamethrower hose connected to a massive tank on his back, which sprayed out some kind of scorching black flame that would supposedly yield pain beyond comprehension if you were ever to come in contact with it. You could say that I was stuck between a rock and a hard place. The only other way out was taking the plunge over the rail in front of me, onto the massive screaming bodies 50 feet below. Before I considered simply saying my prayers, I felt a hand tug at my sleeve from the side, giving me another heart attack. But this time, it was good news. For once. I looked over to see Sandu, poking his head out from what appeared to be some kind of hidden door in the wall.
Let's fucking go!
He whisper-shouted before pulling me in. He closed the door behind him, plunging us into complete darkness.
What the hell is this place?
I asked, hardly expecting a detailed response. Sandu illuminated his face using his phone's flashlight.
I couldn't tell you, but it's fucking crazy.
I could hear the Nazi beginning to spray his flamethrower from out in the corridor. I suddenly wondered whether or not Diaxic's power would apply to the other voids. In any case, it was better not to be in such close vicinity to them, so I followed Sandu. He led me down some kind of hidden hallway. The walk was rather long, maybe about 8 minutes, and I eventually found myself in what appeared to be some kind of surveillance control room. It was still dark, but there was an array of monitors giving off enough light to comfortably navigate around. But here's the strange thing. The place looked kind of haphazard. No chance it was being used by the higher-ups. The monitors were scattered around, connected by a mess of wires to multiple outlets spread throughout the room. There was only one chair.
I guess this is beyond explaining?
I said.
Yeah, no shit, huh?
Sandu replied, before gesturing towards the monitors.
Check it out. What the fuck did we just find?
I took the suggestion, letting my eyes drift over the screens. What I saw would have been normal in any other scenario. Each monitor was streaming a different section of the prison, all displaying the utter carnage that was going on outside. The guards were being ripped to shreds. Some tried fighting, most were running, but what they had in common was the fact that they were all being utterly obliterated by the voids. I could see the surgeon giving somebody a forced lobotomy, grinning like hell while doing so. At the same time, Morgie was chewing on a severed head like a toy. But then I caught something interesting on a screen below. It was Wirehead and Luz staring each other down. That's when a rather obvious revelation hit me. Of course the voids weren't only going to kill the guards, they were sure as hell going after each other as well. That much should have been apparent from the beginning. I grinned, feeling some kind of obscure hope creeping into my system. That hope was only bolstered when I saw the Nazi utterly dousing Diaxic with a relentless wave of black flames, with the latter struggling to move forward as a result. I guess these bastards can be hurt after all, I thought to myself. But of course, my hopes were merely transitory. I wasn't going to kid myself. Even if only one void was left standing at the end of everything, that just meant it'll be the strongest one of them all. And we can't stay in here forever. At this point, my future is uncertain at best. Maybe I'll get lucky, maybe not. But in the meantime, I suppose I'll just enjoy the show. See how things turn out.
Overshield inbound.
This place gives you the creeps, doesn't it? I couldn't disagree with Sandu's assessment of the bizarre room we found ourselves in. The monitors only illuminated the area up until a certain point. However, we couldn't see any walls, which meant that the place had to be bigger than what could be seen, either by a little or a lot. We couldn't know unless we decided to venture further into the darkness. Neither of us took that initiative, though, keeping it a mystery. Still, it didn't feel like anybody was in there with us, so we allowed ourselves to relax a bit. I took the first sitting shift, lying back in the chair and focusing on the monitor that I deemed most interesting at the moment. Wirehead versus Luz. Who was I rooting for? None of them. Nevertheless, I was morbidly eager to see these two horrific titans square off. Amongst us guards, we'd created an unofficial tier system, ranking each respective void in terms of estimated threat in comparison to each other. The tiers went as such: Tornado, weakest; Tsunami, Hurricane, mid; Earthquake, Asteroid, highest; Imminent death, get fucked up. They were also divided into subdivisions: high, low, mid, etc. With that said, Luz was around a high Tornado, while Wirehead was a mid-Tsunami. A glaring difference between them, but not enough that would make it impossible for Luz to win. Want to make a bet? I asked Sandu, half joking. He chuckled. You know my luck's cursed, but I guess if we don't make it out of here alive, then my debt's null anyway. Luz was more of a defensive combatant, so it wasn't surprising when Wirehead initiated the conflict. He twirled his bat around, still with remnants of guard flesh clinging on it, in a near mocking fashion at Luz. He was a delinquent after all. Luz hardly reacted, of course. That's just the way he was. In response, he stepped forward, electricity flickering through his hands and up to his forearms. Wirehead followed suit, unleashing a big swing at Luz's head, which he managed to intercept with one of his forearms. Nevertheless, the wires still pierced his skin. Wirehead followed it up with a headbutt. This time, it connected with the flesh of Luz's face, slicing him up rather gruesomely. But despite his seemingly grievous injuries, he remained unwavering. That was the thing about Luz. He was incapable of feeling any pain. Like I said, his exact origins remained a mystery, but the one thing that we knew about him for sure was the fact that he hailed from some kind of ancient clan residing in the Arctic Circle. In fact, he was the sole survivor of an incident that decimated his village, and he was hungry for revenge against the unknown force that did it. After taking the headbutt, Luz was now in striking range. He formed his fingers into an arrow shape and drove them into Wirehead's solar plexus before electrocuting his insides. Wirehead quaked in pain as he swung his bat in a frenzied rage, just about demolishing Luz's ribcage. No reaction from him, though. Instead, he took his other hand and wrapped it around Wirehead's neck. Any normal person would have succumbed to Luz's electrical shocks after a few seconds, but of course, Wirehead was no normal person. Despite blood pouring out of his chest wound and the skin of his neck beginning to bubble, he picked up Luz by the throat and slammed him over the steel railing. He fucking broke his back. Even without a sound, the mental audio of the spine snapping reverberated throughout my mind. Unsurprisingly, Luz didn't bat an eye. Wirehead went in for the kill, tossing Luz's body onto the ground before smashing it until it resembled nothing more than a mess of bloody pulp and broken bones. But somehow, he was still alive. Among the gruesome pile, I could see an eye blink. Once Wirehead had exhausted himself from his relentless swinging, Luz took his chance. Using his one arm that hadn't been smashed to bits, he crawled over and grabbed Wirehead by the foot before scaling him up to his neck. Once there, he drilled his fist into Wirehead's forehead, utterly shredding his hand in the process. In the end, it was worth the sacrifice. He was able to electrocute Wirehead's brain, finally causing the behemoth to drop. So, I guess he won? Sandu said. I guess. I had my own reservations about calling Luz's performance a victory. By the end of it, all of his limbs and his spine had been shattered, and not an inch of his body wasn't hosting a series of deep cuts. The good side of his face had also been chipped away to the skull, leaving only his eye and half of his nose intact. And yet, he didn't move with a hint of desperation or concern, calmly crawling away from the scene using his one mangled hand. I could still see the current flowing through it as well, a telltale sign that he was ready to pick up another fight. Nice comeback victory, Sandu said. I don't see him making it far, though. Not as a tornado tier. Yeah, but we made all that shit up. It's not like it means anything, I responded. Truth be told, I was nearly rooting for Luz at the end there. Something about his resilience resonated with me, as bizarre as it may seem. I scanned the rest of the monitors. While Wirehead and Luz were squaring off, the undead Nazi had burnt Diaxec to a crisp. On another monitor, Morgie playing around with a void corpse that I recognized as Death Shadow. He chose his own name. 3 down, I muttered to myself. Fuck, we got a big one coming up, Sandu announced. I followed his eyes to a monitor near the bottom of the room. He was right. This one was going to be good. Standing at the opposite sides of the kitchen were Trench, 6'3", 190 centimeters, 330 pounds, 150 kilograms, and Senju, 5'10", 177 centimeters, 148 pounds, 67 kilograms. Trench was a silent entity dressed entirely in ancient-looking deep-sea diving gear, except for the head, which remained without a helmet. However, you couldn't get a glimpse of his face regardless. And that was due to the fact that his features were completely distorted. So much so that if you tried focusing on the details, all you were getting was a nasty migraine. On top of that, he was invisible in person. Let me explain. If you were standing in front of him, you wouldn't be able to see him. The only way to get a glimpse of him was through secondary means, cameras, mirrors, etc., which made him all the more dangerous. As for how he killed people, it was either by brute force, using his monstrous strength, or B, his death aura, as us guards have dubbed it. Similar to Diaxis' zone, once you were in his close vicinity, you'd feel an astronomical amount of pressure and get crushed on the spot, comparable